Now, when you have two elements beside each other, depending on if the margin is positive or negative, the result will be different. If you have two positive margins, the margin or the element with the largest margin, that margin will be used as the margin between the elements. If the two margins are negative, the smallest value will be used. That is the one furthest from 0. So if I have -5 and -10 will be used. If one margin is negative and the other is positive, then the value will be subtracted. Let's see some examples. We have a div, then I have the second div. I'm going to have a margin on the bottom of the first div and a margin on the top of the second div. You're going to see how positive and negative margins affect. So if we look at P1, I have margin bottom 50 pixels, and then on P2, I have margin top 80 pixels. Based on what we read concerning positive margins, what do you think is going to be the result of this? Let me give you a hint. Remember that for positive margins, the largest one is used. So because we have the first one, margin bottom 50, the second one, margin top 80, the margin between these elements will actually be 80 because 80 is the largest. It wouldn't go ahead to add it. So let's look at it in the web. Let's inspect. So we have our two elements, right? Let's hover over them. I can hover over the first one, which shows me where margin 50 will stop. But notice that it doesn't have any effect in pushing the elements below. And if I hover over the elements below, you can see that the margin top is 80. And it was that margin top that was used to gap it and the elements above. This is such that even if I remove the margin bottom from the first element, it wouldn't have any difference. So for example, if I disable margin bottom, because the margin between them is 80, disabling that margin bottom does not have any difference. Even if I enable it, CSS looks at both of them, sees that margin 80 is the largest, and keeps it as the one that is being used. But if I disable the margin top for the element below, notice that the gap between them reduced. And now the margin between them is 50 pixels. If I enable the margins up again, the space comes up again. Now, let's say I make the margin bottom of P1 -40. So now we have a negative value. And there we have it. The margin between these two is actually 40. It has done a little bit of subtraction such that that space between these two elements is actually 40 pixels. So this is how it behaves.